Hello, Mayhem makers. It's Mindy with Quilting Mayhem, back for another Mindy's Monday Mayhem Tips Live. This week, we're going to talk about thread, needles, and tension. So it's one of those basics that I just feel everybody always seems to be confused by or have questions with, that just need to be kind of in your book of knowledge in your brain. There's always so many things that come into play when you start talking about threads, needles, tension on your machine, what projects you're working on, all those kinds of questions. And I know some of you probably get frustrated with us when you call and you start asking questions because you're not sure if your machine's acting up or there's a problem with your thread or all those kinds of things. And because we do carry quite a few different types of machines, I thought I'd just do that kind of overview. We're just going to go over the basics because otherwise you're going to be here all day with me, and I don't think we need that. Maybe we'll do a full day class or something for that. I'm going to try to find some video tutorials from Bernina and Handy Quilter for you guys because they do a great job teaching it and talking about it and giving a little more in-depth information. And I don't want to bore you to death, but I do want to give you just some of those basics because I feel it's kind of important, especially when you're calling us. It may give you just a better idea of where we come from when we start asking you questions about, you know, what thread are you using? What needles are you using? All those kinds of things. There is a purpose to those questions when we ask them. We're not just trying to drive you crazy, even though it may seem like it. So behind me, I have, you know, my favorite machine. We've talked about it. You know, the Q series from Bernina. I love it. This is the one on the frame. I've been playing with this one lately. As you can see, I've got a panel I'm about to quilt, and I'm starting to come up with some designs. And the one thing I love, besides, you know, the hundreds of other things, is that the Q series Bernina long arms use the same needles as the domestics. So those same flat back style needle I can use in all my machines, so that is a plus. Some of the other long arms, like the Handy quilters that we use a round shaft needle or round shank, what they call an industrial style needle, and so it's a little different and does not work in your domestic machine. It is purely made for those high-speed industrial machines. So something to keep in mind as I talk about needles and machines. When I'm talking Bernina, they're all those nice basic flat back style. Handy Quilter does have the different style. And I am going to kind of walk through, show you a couple different machines, and then kind of sit and do show you some needles and threads and those kinds of things. So just keep in mind, you know, this machine, it also generally uses these larger cones. Some of them are a polyester, some of them are a cotton. Both work great on the machine. So it's kind of nice to know that most of the machines we have, you can use all kinds of threads. So I want you to understand that there is a lot of variety out there that you can use. These machines are not one-trick ponies where you can only use cotton, only use polyester, only use long arm thread, all those kinds of things. We're going to debunk a lot of that thought process that maybe you have because maybe you just weren't taught when you bought your machine, or maybe you're just doing research on machines and just starting to figure it out. So you can use little spools of cotton. You can use them on these big guys. You just run out faster, all that kind of stuff. So keep that in mind. You can play, you can have all kinds of fun. So, you know, these big Bernina machines, and then of course, if you've been here with us, you also know we carry these Handy quilters. We'll show you. I've got this little guy here, a little Simply. Same idea. Use cotton, use poly, just uses a different needle. But otherwise, thread-wise, you can, shiny threads, all that. You can do it all. So keep in mind, you can do all kinds of fun stuff and use them on your domestic. So you are not stuck in a box, you know, or stuck with thread. That's always a big thing too. Thread can be such a huge investment. And then, you know, even they've got the Moxie's been super popular lately. And then even my favorite, we'll come over to this guy, the Amara. we'll show you. I'll try not to make you too nauseous. This thing's feeling a little squirrely today. This is the Amara handy quilter, and this is one, as far as handy quilter is concerned, this is one of my favorites. I like the size, and the Pro Stitcher on it just makes it easy. Hey Curtis, welcome! And then of course, you know, domestic machines. We got all our Berninas, our Burnett's, sergers, and those kinds of things. And also keep in mind, even sergers, you don't necessarily have to use a serger thread in your serger. Good to know. So I don't want you just thinking one-trick ponies. We have a lot of uses. So I'm going to come over here. I'm going to see if I can park myself and not make it completely nauseous, because I got all my demo fun stuff. And hopefully the heater's not making it too hard for you guys to hear. So this is the bad boy I have at home, the good old Bernina 790. Keep in mind, so these type of machines, a lot of the tensioning, because I said we talk about tension, is actually done in the machine itself. Does it for you. You don't have to do a lot of thinking unless you start playing with some super shiny threads or really stretchy poly threads. Then you may have to manually change your tensions just to make sure you get it stitching right in your machine. The handy quilter machines tension, you are manually adjusting them, those kinds of things. So, and your domestic machine at home may have a thread tension knob on it. So keep in mind, everything's different, and that's why I'm not going to go like super into detail for you guys, because there's, besides what we have, there's so many other machines. Just don't be afraid to play with them, okay? Play with your tension. I forgot I was going to show. So you may even have like an older Bernina, like this guy, the good old 440. This is my backup. It has thread tension adjustment up here. This little knob that you just move, and then it has a red, well, it used to have a red line. Mine's kind of faded, but it'll have a red line on top that shows you essentially where home base is. So even if you have that stuff, don't be afraid to touch it. I don't know how many times I talk to you guys and you're like, oh, I don't touch that. I was told not to touch that. That one's okay to touch. Just remember, you may need to touch it again to set it back when you change your threads again. So it's okay. Mindy said it's okay. Because I just find it funny. Because the most common time that I generally do have to touch that tension knob is I play with monopoly. So this is a clear monofilament polyester. So monopoly, while I love it, I know there are plenty of you out there that absolutely hate it or tell me your machine doesn't love it because you're not changing your tension. You may need to drop it all the way to 0. So if you're using a thread sewing and maybe it's puckering, maybe it's a polyester that it's getting pulled too tight in that tension disc up top, and then when it gets in the fabric, it kind of, what it does is it snaps back like a rubber band, and it's making that puckering in your fabric. So drop that upper tension if you're getting some puckering and see if that helps you out, okay? There's so much to go into. So if you're calling us and you're having tension issues, we're going to ask you, what fabric are you working on? Is it cotton? Is it canvas? Is it woven? Is it rayon? Because that will make a difference. That makes a difference in what needle you need. Potentially what thread you should be using. Say if you're doing garments, we may recommend that you use a polyester, a heavier duty thread than say a cotton. Those kinds of things. So we're going to ask you, because the fabric you're stitching on will make a difference with how your needle and your thread behave. Okay, so keep that in mind, that not all fabrics are created equal. So you're just going to have to be ready to maybe change up your thread or your needle game for that, okay? And then your needles, you know, what needle are you using? There's so many out there. There's your universal, which is a fairly generic needle. There is Microtex, which is what I use when I piece. It's a nice, very sharp point, so it's making nice crisp holes as it sews. Ball points, if you're working with knit. You don't want that finer point in it because it's potentially going to break up threads and you may start getting bigger holes in your fabrics. You might want a ball point that has a rounded end. All those kinds of things. I'll show you. I kind of have, if you go to the Schmetz needles, They have great information. I mean, look at this. We have this great kind of cheater guide here. So if you have questions, you can always come in the store, check this out. I know online they have all kinds of information, and it's very helpful. It's definitely a great guide to tell you what needle should go with what fabric. So keep that in mind as you're playing with fabrics. You may need to change that up and you'll have a better success rate, especially if you're doing, say, machine embroidery. Like this machine has embroidery. We even have, you know, embroidery needles. Good titanium coated, that was heavier duty because it's going faster. It's made for embroidery for those higher speeds, and a lot of movement. Where straight piecing, it's straight. That needle doesn't have to worry about the hoop moving around and you're punching through stabilizers and all those kinds of things. So you may need machine embroidery needles if you're doing machine embroidery. Do realize you have to change your needles. You just do. It's just how it goes. You can't expect your one needle to last a lifetime. Unfortunately, it is what we call a wearable item. You do need to change them. We recommend you change them often. Even some companies like Bernina say every 8 hours. They just wear out, and the more they wear down the point of it, you're not getting as good a stitch in it. So, you know, get yourself multi-packs of needles like micro-tacks, you know. And I even like getting variety packs. So even if you're going to start with universals, because maybe you do garments and quilting and home deck, you can even start with a multi-pack of universal. All those kinds of things. And then you can even get into coated needles. So they are meant to last longer. You won't need to change them as much. Higher price point. If you're a well-behaved sewist and maybe don't break as many needles, titanium's way to go. It's not going to save you per se from breaking. Don't run over your pins. Just don't. I tell you that all the time. Makes your technician angry. So nothing's really going to save you from, you know, if you run over a pin and break it. But it will help last a little longer, so you can go further between projects. Or like I just have like a bulk 50 pack of microtex at home, and I just keep swapping through them, and it takes me a while to get through a box of them. I sew a lot, but still, it's a better investment for me because I do a lot of sewing. If you're not, you know, get your 5-pack, 10-pack, and just make sure you're changing them at least, you know, every project, depending on, you know, or if you're doing a lot of smaller projects, maybe every couple projects. Don't just wait for it to break. That's not when you change your needle. And then I have this guy, thought I'd show. We have some of the fun props here. I have the giant Schmetz needle. So you have your eye of your needle and then the point. So when we start talking to you about the size of the eye of the needle and the size of the thread, your thread comes in what they call different weights. A 50 weight is right in the middle of the road. Great for piecing and those kinds of things. And then of course, it seems kind of counterintuitive, but as you get smaller in number, thicker in the thread, it's based on a weight measurement system of how much thread can fit at a certain weight. And then of course, the higher number you get, the thinner the thread is. Great to play with. A lot of people like to go up to that 80 weight, 100 weight, that really thin thread for quilting and those kinds of things, because they maybe don't want their design to show as much. And then of course, as you get into the smaller numbers, that thicker thread, then you even start getting into your hand embroidery flosses, or you want those thicker threads, you want your quilting to show, and those kinds of things. So you'll start seeing those things and learning them along the way. But keep in mind, so when you're working with machine sewing or quilting, long arm quilting, those kinds of things, the weight of your thread and the size of the eye of your needle, and those numbers will be on your needle packs, will make a difference. So we generally say if you're using that 50 weight, middle of the road, you want a size 80-12 needle. Those are the two that will fit the happiest. Because what will happen is if your thread is too thick, I don't have that sample, and doesn't fit through this eye, it's going to essentially start to shred your thread because it's like trying to cram it through, and it's going to have a lot of friction, a lot of resistance. And then of course, if you have like this scenario where this thread is way too loose in there, you're going to get sloppy stitches because that thread is kind of weaving up and down in the needle as it's trying to make that stitch in your machine. This is why I say I'm going to send you video links and some of that kind of stuff on the page for you to see much better descriptions. I know there's great videos out there that give you that visual of why you want your thread and your needles to be matched up just right. So if you're going into thicker threads, going down to 40s, 30s, 20 size threads, you're definitely going to want a bigger eye needle. It's kind of the reverse. Just remember, the higher the eye number is going to be a bigger eye. It'll fit that lower number of thread. It's very cross-reference, counterintuitive. It's a little weird. It takes getting used to, but that's what we're here for. If you ever have questions and you go, I know Mindy talked about this, but I don't remember which way goes which, because it takes a long time to remember those things, just call us. But definitely when you're going up those higher numbers of threads where they're thinner, then go down in your needle size. So go down to like a 70 or a 60. And you will have all different kinds of threads. So, you know, like this is good old isocord. Yeah, I mean, you can't even really see it. It's a nice, shiny, thinner thread. Seen a lot for machine embroidery. So you're gonna stick in that 80 or 70 range. If you get into shiny, sometimes you might even want to use a metallic needle because metallic threads act differently because of how they're made. So just realize there's all different pieces and parts to the equation of what's going to get you the best stitch. Play with it with your machine, play with your thread, play with your needles. If you don't know, absolutely ask us questions, because that's what we're here for. We're here to answer those questions, and I don't expect you to remember everything, but I want those basics. I want you to know that there are needles made for different applications, you know, for doing garments and those kinds of things. There are threads that are going to want different needles in size, different needles in the points, and all those kinds of things. So just keep in mind, if you're having an issue, it's not always just the machine has a problem. Don't start going, oh, my machine doesn't work, and drag it out and say, here, it's broken because it's not stitching, something's not right. Stop, take a breath, call us, come back to this video and go, oh, okay, I was using this thread and this needle with this fabric and it didn't like that. You know, maybe you were using too thick of a thread to go through the eye of the needle that you have, or maybe you were using that sharp needle and it's shredding your knit fabric because it's just splicing through, instead of using a ball point to nicely just kind of shove the fibers in your knits aside versus just kind of powerhousing through them. All those kinds of scenarios, it's a big world of information, and the best that you can do is just start educating yourself, start figuring those things out, and just play. So, but keep in mind, you know, as you're learning and growing and you're sewing, things are going to change. You know, if you step out of the world of just cotton piecing with cotton threads, things are going to change. We're here to teach you how to change those things, but just keep that in mind, that as you change what you're putting through your machine, be ready to adapt. You know, maybe stock up on some different needles so that you're ready, and you know, or if you're here and you're doing a new project and maybe you're stepping into garments and rayons and go, okay, I'm playing with a different fabric. Should I be changing my thread? Should I be changing my needle? Ask us those questions, because we don't expect you to know, especially if you're trying new things. We're encouraging you to do all these new projects and just new types of sewing this year. So feel free, ask the questions. Don't feel embarrassed. It's expected. Even I continue to have to ask questions about new projects of, oh wait, what, I'm playing with this new thing. What do we need to change? What do I need to change? Oh, do I play with tension? All those kinds of things. Just ask questions. That's what we're here for, and it's not to be, you know, shamed upon. It's part of the education process. And understand that most of the time with machines, unless talking long arms, you potentially aren't going to need to play with your bobbin tension, because a lot of your bobbins, you can adjust that tension. Most of the time you don't need to, unless you really are getting into what they call like bobbin work, where you're putting that thicker thread, that 8 or 10 weight thread in the bobbin. Then yeah, you're going to need to change it. Or you're doing machine embroidery and maybe you're using a machine embroidery bobbin or those kinds of things, and maybe that's not necessarily keeping up. Okay, yeah, you may need to change that, but then most of the time, you know, your bobbin, that you won't need to play with near as much as playing up top, making those adjustments. What's nice with the Berninas, you know, most of the time it knows what to do, or you can just touch the screen and just manually start to play with it and test it out. Especially if you're quilting, those kinds of things, you're definitely going to play with your stitches, and I always recommend you do it first on a scrap piece of muslin and batting and all those kinds of things, just to check your stitch, especially if you're changing into a thicker thread or a different needle, or changing from a walking foot to a stitch regulator, all those kinds of things. Play, just, you know, that's what, all those scraps you have laying around, hopefully, grab a chunk, play with it, see how it works. And if it's just not being happy, call us, we'll help you out. Or you're doing a machine embroidery, maybe you're new to machine embroidery and it's not stitching out and you're getting weird loops, or it's gunking up on the back. Call us, ask questions. Don't get mad at the machine, be nice to it. It may not be its fault, it may be, and who knows, you know, maybe you have an older machine and it's just tired and needs a cleaning, who knows. But don't give up, don't just throw the project away and move on to something else. Feel free, give us a call or come see us or ask for a one-on-one, all those kinds of things. That's what we're here for. It's just to help you learn, help you get educated, and answer those questions. So I know it's a lot of just kind of glossy overview of things, but like I warned you, I just want to give you some basics, and then you know, we'll get you into more details of different projects and different applications. Maybe we'll do some machine embroidery tutorials and some of those kinds of things, just to show you all the different things that you can do. But just, you know, keep in mind, or even glow in the dark thread, fun stuff. But keep in mind, you know, like this is a thicker thread. It's gonna behave differently. You know, just stop and think, what am I gonna need to do? Am I gonna need to change needle size, or maybe you need a stabilizer under your project, all that kind of stuff. So be prepared to just ask questions, take a breath, reach out to us. You can message us on Facebook, you can call the store, like I said, you can try to do a one-on-one. If it just, you need some hands-on face-to-face approach, we can safely do that in our own, you know, socially distanced manner to make sure you all stay safe, or virtually even, any of those kinds of things. We're just here to make you as successful as possible. So I think that's more than enough info to make your brains explode for the day. But feel free, just let us know what you have questions with, and we're here to help. So hope you have a fabulous Monday. Hopefully maybe this gave you a little nugget of info that you'll just kind of keep back there and keep in mind as you keep rolling through different projects, and maybe it'll save you from a headache down the road. So have a lovely day and just keep on stitching.